Well, welcome out there once again to my program. It's always a pleasure to be here. It's always a pleasure to have you out there. I have a guest who has been on my program a number of times, and from the viewers out there who have talked to me about the program after watching it, of course, have said they get a lot of good information, Well, my guest is an attorney, and he practices in the field of real estate, land, law, things of that nature, closings, mortgages, draws up deeds, does title searches. Very interesting area of the law, and very crucial, because of course if you're out there looking for a piece of property, first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you know what you're going to buy. And the thing is that before you buy the property, you want to have a title search. We're going to talk about what a title search is. And from the other side, as a seller, you'll need certain paperwork done, of course. You'll need a purchase and sales agreement. You might list the property with a broker. You might try to sell it yourself. So these are the different things that we'll be talking about. And welcome, Attorney Paul Albro.
Thank you.
How you doing? Back. Good. Glad to see you again.
Thank you.
A nice suit. You're looking good.
Try to look my best for you, Richard.
Yeah. Must be prospering. Well, let's first of all, let the audience know where your office is.
My office is up in Norton, and I do pretty much cover eastern Massachusetts as far as doing real estate closings. I represent lenders, individuals, usually in real estate transactions, whether you're buying or selling either side, or representing the bank in doing the closing for the mortgage.
Represent developers?
Not so much that.
Not
no.
so much.
Pretty much the buyers and the sellers. And,
get involved with looking over a purchase and sales agreement?
Correct, yep.
What is a purchase and sales agreement for the benefit of the audience?
The purchase and sale agreement is your agreement to, if you're the buyer, to buy the property from the seller on the terms that you've already done an offer. So the offer is usually a one-page or two-page document. When you go to see the house, you're all excited on the weekend on a Sunday, you love the house, and you're like, I want this, and you sign an offer saying to the owner of the property, I want to buy the house for this price, and I want to close on this date. Close means to purchase the property on a certain date. And you might put in the offer that it's subject to certain things like a home inspection, or if there's a septic system, subject to Title V, subject to getting a mortgage, things like that. Then the purchase and sale agreement.
So that might be accompanied by a little deposit?
Right. So with the offer, you usually put down like $500 or $1,000 just to show that you're serious.
So it's a temporary, right.
Kind of like holding your spot. You know?
And if you don't go any further, you could forfeit the $500?
You could. It's pretty unusual that you lose that deposit. It's usually not worth fighting over the seller. I usually tell sellers if the buyer backs out, just release the deposit and move on. Try to get the property back on the market as soon as possible.
Now, if there's a broker involved before the property goes on a market, usually there's a listing agreement?
Correct. So if you're the seller, you have a listing agreement with a broker, and that usually spells out like what commission you're going to pay when the property is sold. So it's usually a percentage. A lot of times it's 5% of the purchase price, but talk to the agent as far as whether you can negotiate that. And then it will spell out as far as how long the listing is for, the agreement for. A lot of times it's 6 months that office has to market the property and try to sell it. And then after those 6 months, then you won't be using that office if you don't extend it.
Now, typically in a listing agreement, is there a clause? I've seen it in a number of these listing agreements that the broker will be entitled to a commission if the property is sold to someone he has shown the property to?
Correct. they need to protect themselves, the agents, as far as, say it's a 6-month agreement. If they show the property to somebody in the 5th month, say, and that person comes back after the agreement is done, because maybe wink wink with the buyer, like,
Okay.
I'll come back after 6 months and maybe we just split what you were gonna pay for a commission, you know, reduce the price by a little bit.
The seller
what you were
could
gonna
have a
pay.
problem.
Yeah.
Now, is it good practice for the listing agent to give a notice to the seller? I've shown his property to so-and-so, this is their name.
Yeah, usually agents keep a record of who they've shown the property to, so they keep the names and whatnot, so they can go and check and say, if there was a transaction after the showing, after the agreement, then they could go back to the seller and say, we introduced that person to the property.
All right, so here you have, person owns a piece of property, seller, and the first piece of paper that might pass is the offer. And then, of course, well, that what precedes that would be the listing agreement,
Yeah.
and then the offer might come about, and then the actual purchase and sales agreement, which
Right.
is
Which is a longer document, might be 6 pages, 10 pages. And purchase and sale agreements are usually very standard documents. We all, attorneys or realtors, have standard forms in our computers that we use for transactions, and then we change the terms, obviously, based on, you know, whatever the parties have agreed to as far as the price and the dates and things like that. Where purchase and sale agreements are usually negotiated between the parties is if there are inspection issues, because usually between the offer and the purchase and sale agreement, so the buyer does a home inspection, will hire a professional home inspector to look at the property, see if there's any issues that maybe the buyer didn't notice when they looked at the house and needs repairs, and then they negotiate with the seller on those repairs.
and that gets put into the purchase and sales agreement.
Correct.
So if the home inspector tells the buyer, look, the chimney on this property is really, you know, the bricks are loose, the mortar is powdery, you'll need extensive work, you should go out there and get yourself an estimate from a mason.
Right.
So that will then be put into the purchase and sales agreement, subject to
The chimney being repaired, if the seller has agreed to it. Because the seller could always come back and say,
It
no,
should-
I'm not gonna do it.
it's
You know,
as is.
It's as is. The price reflects that the house needed repairs, so that's the way it goes. And then you as a buyer, you can say, well, I don't wanna buy the house with that problem, or you do buy the house. It's all negotiation, there's no right or wrong to it. And there's a couple ways you can handle inspection issues, because you might not want the seller to do the repair. Maybe you want to do the work yourself, or you trust somebody to do it the right way, so maybe you negotiate with the seller a price credit, you know, say reduce the price by X amount of dollars, and then I'll take care of the repair. So a lot of people do that too.
So once the purchase and sales agreement, it's a negotiable instrument in the sense that you can negotiate, not that you can pass it along.
Right.
But, so there's this back and forth.
Mhm.
And once an agreement is reached, both parties sign.
Yep.
Broker traditionally signs too?
Nowadays, they're not looking for brokers to sign it.
All right,
In
so
the past, brokers used to sign them, but now, usually.
was that more or less to protect their own commission?
Right, yeah. Protect their commission, maybe just to make sure who's the parties to the whole transaction, but recently I have not seen brokers signing purchase and sale agreements. So.
Now, the purchase and sales agreement, it seems like a fairly technical piece of work, but it doesn't have to go before, you know, or be looked at by an attorney, is that correct?
Well, most people do have an attorney look at it
At that
nowadays.
point.
Yeah. Because there are terms that you want to make sure that are in the contract. Whether you're representing a seller, there's certain things that you look for, or whether you're representing a buyer, there's certain things you look for to make sure like your deposit is protected. Because when you sign a purchase and sale agreement, now with the offer you put down that small amount of money. With the purchase and sale agreement, you put down a much larger deposit, Sometimes it can be 5% of the purchase price.
So if it's $100,000, that would be $5,000.
$5,000. So that's a good amount of money that if you don't perform the contract, you can lose that money. The seller can keep the deposit. So if you decide not to buy the property for some reason, then they can keep the deposit. There are things in the contract that protect you, like if you cannot get financing by a certain time, then you can get out of the agreement and get your deposit back. But you can't just change your mind and say, oh, I found another house I like, so give me my deposit back.
Could forfeit the deposit.
Yeah.
Deposit generally held by who? Do you
It's
find?
usually held by the listing agent's office.
Put in an escrow account?
In an escrow account. Sometimes, if there are no agents, because you don't always have agents involved.
Could be a
it
private
would-
sale?
Private sale, so then an attorney would hold it. Usually the seller's attorney would hold it, but either attorney would hold it in escrow.
Oh, all right, so the purchase and sales agreement is reached, both parties have signed, and you're dealing with the, we'll say, the buyer of the property. Next thing, title search?
Next thing, you have a title search done.
And the purchase and sales agreement is subject to a title search?
Right, so the purchase and sale agreement will say that it's subject to the seller giving you clear title to the property, so that there are no liens in the property, nothing wrong with the title as far as all the deeds have been transferred properly in the record. So it depends on the buyer as far as the title exam goes, whether you're getting financing, a mortgage, to purchase the property, then the bank that you use will hire an attorney to do the closing, and that attorney will do a title search on the property. Or if you're doing a private deal with no mortgage, a cash deal, a buyer will hire an attorney to do the title search and do the closing for them.
Okay, and you do title searches and you do the closings. So
Right,
if it was a private transaction, you take care of all that paperwork for the buyer
Right.
and the seller?
Yeah, so if it's a private transaction, usually the parties have attorneys for each side.
Each side.
So I would do, if I was representing the buyer, I would do the title exam, and then I would handle the closing, which on a purchase, for a cash purchase, it's much simpler, a lot fewer pieces of paper that you have to sign in the closing.
No mortgage involved?
No, so, but you have a simple, somebody has to be doing the settlement statement, breaking down the numbers between the two parties and kind of dispersing the money. Maybe the seller has a mortgage on the property, somebody has to take care of paying off that mortgage. So that's why you need somebody to handle the actual closing, but it's much simpler than the mortgage closing.
Well, let's say that there is, it's a private sale, but the seller has negotiated or spoken to the buyer about some financing.
Mm-hmm.
When financing is done on a piece of property, it's generally called a mortgage. Is that correct?
Right. So
What is a mortgage?
So the mortgage is the security for the person has made a promise to pay back the other person, so the lender. So a mortgage can be a private mortgage. You could give me a mortgage so I can go buy a property, and you might be lending me $100,000. Well, you want security that you're going to get that $100,000 back. So you say, Paul, give me a mortgage on the property that you buy, so that if I sell the property, you're paid whatever is due on.
And that's called the first mortgage?
First mortgage, yeah. Whoever's on record first
Is
first, obviously, and then it just goes in order. It's just whoever's at the registry deeds.
Now, of course, there have been situations where someone is granted a mortgage on a piece of property and neglects to record,
Right.
or didn't want to record for some reason.
Mhm.
What's the pitfall in not recording a mortgage?
Well, the risk with that is that then the person that owns the property could go out and get another mortgage from a regular lender or another person, and that person puts the mortgage on record. So they would be first. And then if you were just holding that mortgage in your pocket, then you're like, oh, I forgot to do that, and I run down to the registry of deeds. Well, you're behind that first mortgage.
And
So the
that's not
problem with
good.
that- No, if there's no equity in the house, so, if the house is only worth $100,000 and that first mortgage is $100,000, you'd be out of luck as far as getting any money if you wanted to foreclose on the property or if the property's sold.
Now, along with the mortgage, now is there any kind, people speak about what they call a note, a promissory note or a mortgage note.
Yep.
Explain that for us.
The note is your promise to pay the bank. So you're making a promise to the bank or the lender, if it's a private person, that I will pay you back, say $100,000, and it will say what the interest rate is, whether it's a fixed rate or adjustable, the monthly payments, the term of the loan, how many years it's going to take for you to pay it back is negotiated, and that's all in the note, and that's your promise.
So the note is basically more specific than the mortgage itself. So the mortgage might just give the total amount of money that.
Right. The mortgage does not show the terms of the loan as far as like the interest rate, your monthly payment. The mortgage will show how much the loan is for and how many years it's supposed to be for. The mortgage is because the lender doesn't trust you. They like your promise to pay, but they don't trust you.
But they want collateral.
So it's the collateral. So the mortgage is used so that if you don't complete your promise to pay back the loan, the mortgage is used to foreclose on the property.
Now, there is some language, and you can expound on this in the mortgage in regards to what they call the statutory sale.
Statutory power of sale.
Yeah, what is that?
That's giving the lender the right to sell the property if you do not perform the terms of the note. So if you default on the note, and we talk about basically that you didn't make your monthly payments on the mortgage as the default, but there are other ways that you can default. Maybe you don't pay your taxes, so then there are real estate tax liens on the property.
And does that come in? That comes into the note.
Mm-hmm. In the note, you're making that promise, and then the mortgage also is saying that you will perform these things as far as maintaining the property, pay the taxes, pay the insurance.
Okay,
like
so that could be in the mortgage itself.
Yeah.
And then it could be repeated in the note.
Right.
So the statutory power of sale is by statute under the, we'll say in Massachusetts, you'd go to the foreclosure statute insofar as the process and procedure.
Yeah. There's lots of procedures that a lender has to go through, especially in the last few years. They've been changing the rules so that to protect homeowners that have gotten themselves into difficulty with a lender. So the state has increased notice requirements. The basic thought is they want lenders to work with homeowners if they're in default to try to work it out some way, somehow. So there's almost like a cooling off period as far as like giving the lender and the homeowner a chance to work it out. Maybe they extend the loan to make the payments cheaper, or reduce the principal balance, or reduce the interest rate. Different ways. If all that doesn't work out, then the bank can foreclose on the property, and then there's notice requirements, and that's when you see notices in the newspaper saying that there's an auction.
Foreclosure,
and there's all the procedures for that, which is rather complicated, but at the end of the day, if they follow all the procedures, the bank ends up, or the lender, because a private person can do a foreclosure, ends up being the owner of the property.
So that's what that clause means, that the power of
Statutory power of sale.
Yeah, it just basically is
Giving
letting
you the right as a lender to foreclose, and it's basically referencing you to the foreclosure statute
Right.
in Massachusetts.
It's not like the old days, pull a horse cart up to the house and throw all the furniture and
Right.
and tell them you're out.
Yeah.
The king could do that,
Yes.
along with the king's men, but nowadays altogether different, a lot more difficult.
Some lenders weren't so different in the past few years, but
Now, okay, so we talked about the mortgage, and we talked about the note, but there's the deed.
right.
Now, what is the deed?
The deed is your record that you own the property. So the deed is what the seller will sign at the closing, saying, I, John Smith, grant the property for X price to, Richard Smith, and it'll have the legal description of the property, which is the boundaries of the property, and then that's signed by the seller. It's not signed by the buyer, and it's notarized, and then that deed gets recorded at the registry of deeds, and that's your proof that you own the property. Sort of like the title to your car, that you have the title to. You do not need the original deed for anything, because it gets recorded at the registry of deeds. So they're the official keeper of the records, which is important. That I should note, there's been a scam out there. The registries have been notifying people that
Oh, yeah.
there are companies out there that send you a letter saying, get an official record of your deed for $75. We'll send you the official record of your deed. It's a scam. You can go to the registry of deeds and spend $1 to get a copy of your deed. There's no reason to spend $75 to get a copy of your deed. The original deed should come back to you, but if you don't panic. The official record is at the registry of deeds. So if a company contacts you like that, don't pay attention to it.
So the deed will have the name of the current property owner, and they're the grantor. And it has the name of the person who will, be the next owner of that property. Now, husband and wife own a property. Both signatures are needed to transfer.
Right. Yep. The wife would be a little upset with you if you try to sell the property without her. And I should say, it's also usually in Massachusetts, it's called a quitclaim deed.
Okay.
A lot of people get confused with that term.
Warranty deeds are kind of,
deeds and all that.
they're kind of passe?
Yeah, well, it's just Massachusetts has always done quitclaim deeds.
All right.
In other states, that would be the equivalent of a warranty deed.
Okay.
So quitclaim is what you should get. It's almost
In other words,
99%.
what I have, I'll give to you.
Right.
Quick claim in a sense. I guess that's the sort of definition of that. Now, the other thing is, husband and wife own a piece of property, and the husband doesn't want to convey, but he'd like to mortgage. He's got some big gambling debts, so he goes off to the local loan shark, and he says, "Look, I own a piece of property. I'm into you for a lot of money, and I'll give you a mortgage on a property and do the best I can, to make the payments. And if I don't, you can take the property." But wife is on a deed too, tenants by the entirety. Can he mortgage?
No.
Okay, so
Not without the wife.
wife, you're all set.
Yeah.
You're safe. If he's
You're
gambling,
trying to bring the casino issue into this.
well, they were foreclosing, weren't they?
Yes, some of them were.
Yeah, I guess Foxwoods was out there, and apparently some people owned heavy debts. And well, now, the only reason they could foreclose, let's take this Foxwoods business, is they would have to have a mortgage, first of all. Is that correct?
Well, they could have a mortgage or they could have a lien. So maybe what they could do is, if they're owed money, and this goes for like anybody that has, say, a credit card debt and they don't pay it back, that company can go to the courts and sue you for the amount of money that is owed to them. And if
And
they
you get
win,
that lien.
then they can get what's called an attachment on the property, first step.
Oh, yeah.
And then next step is, if they get the judgment, is what's called an execution, and that's the official lien on the property. And that stays on the property until it's paid in full for a certain number of years, and then it would expire.
But they can move against it.
Yeah, so they could technically, when you have an execution on the property, the person that holds that execution can do what's called a sheriff's sale of the property to get the judgment.
That's
which is
the
like a
equivalent of
foreclosure.
an auction sale,
Yeah.
in a sense.
It's unusual to do because it's subject to anything that's on record before that execution. So if there's a mortgage on record, they would be getting the property subject to that mortgage. So it doesn't happen often, a sheriff's sale, but it could happen. But that's why people have a homestead law too, to protect you against having that.
Well, let's get into the homestead. What is it up to now, if you know?
It would be $500,000 if you record it. Okay.
500,
Yeah.
single person or married?
Single.
500,000. So that's quite a bit
Yeah.
of coverage.
So it's $125,000 if you don't record it. So it used to be that you had to record the declaration of homestead in order to have the homestead protection. And about 3 years ago, they changed the law so that every homeowner, this only goes for your home that you own, that you live in.
Principal home.
Not investment properties. Everybody automatically has $125,000 protection of equity.
That's it, whether you
Recorded or not.
or not. And you don't even have to have the piece of paper?
You don't have to have the piece of paper.
Okay.
But if you record the declaration of homestead, then you have protection up to $500,000. So some people are like, well, why don't I just record it? Well, it's up to you. You know, some people won't have that much equity in the house. It's only $35 to record at the registry of deeds. The forms, you know, some attorneys will charge for it, but you can also do it at the registry of deeds. They have the forms for free down there. And it's something you sign and it gets notarized. And
Let's
recorded.
just touch on an easement briefly. That's a question we've talked about. In general terms, what is an easement?
An easement is giving somebody a right of access on your property for some reason. So you own a piece of property and another person wants to have access maybe across your property or needs access to the property for some reason. So what you commonly see on deeds is like a utility easement. So the utility company.
If someone wanted that easement, you'd have to draw up another deed. Is that correct?
A deed or a grant of easement, which is something you record. So you don't have to do a deed, but just a grant of easement.
All right.
And
now
gets
that's what
recorded.
it would say, grant of easement?
Right.
And that would get recorded. And in that grant of easement, there would be
It defines what the easement is.
let's say it's a roadway.
Right, so it would define
Maybe the width of the road, the length of the road.
Who maintains it, the cost of it, things like that.
Okay.
There are all types of different types of easements. You could have view easements where, you know, somebody near the water, the ocean, wants to be able to see the ocean from their house, and maybe the neighbor's trees would be in the way, so the easement, the neighbor says, okay, we'll keep our trees low so you can see the ocean, and it's called a view easement. You know, it could have something like that.
And that's legally enforceable. So
Yep.
the next
And
owner,
there's lots of cases about that.
and the next owner, you better keep the
Is
trees at a
right.
certain.
Yep.
All right.
And common easement is a driveway easement, where you might have a shared driveway between two properties, especially here in Fall River. And it's just important for you to know that you cannot, what's called, burden the easement. So you can't block the driveway, the other person's access to the driveway, things like that.
Typically, I guess, well, we're down the end of the program, but I was going to just mention sewer, water to the second house in the back.
Right, yeah,
There was a
and you
good
would have an easement for the pipes so that
Could fix
the
them.
city can fix them or the homeowner can fix them.
Well, Paul Abreu, thank you very much, Attorney Paul Abreu. Wonderful job once again. A lot of good information. I always learn something myself here on my own program. I want to just mention that come Monday, this Monday coming, Memorial Day, we're going to have a ceremony at the Miller Monument. That's the intersection of South and Shove Street in Fall River. It'll be at 11:30. So if you're out there and you want to attend, I know a lot of people attend the ceremony. It'll start at 11:30. We'll have a speaking program, wreath laying ceremony, and remember Corporal David Miller gave his life during World War II. He was captured by the Japanese in the Philippines, put on a Patan death march, survived, and ended up in a Japanese prisoner of war camp where he died. His body was never returned. And the monument there, that patch of ground is his symbolic burial ground. And the other thing is that June 4th, there's going to be a meeting at the Liberal Club at 6:30, and this is going to be all about the casino in the South End, or casinos in general. So June 4th, Wednesday, 6:30 at the Liberal Club, if you have time. Should be interesting insofar as the benefits and detriments of casino in your neighborhood. Thank you once again out there for watching, and I'll see you next time.